Welcome to the Noon Show here on day 3 of the Farm Progress Virtual Experience. And Matt Jungmann, the guy who marshals the forces to bring the shows together in not only Decatur and Boone, but Grand Island as well, joins us here. We appreciate it. You draw on so many experiences of the past to give us a little better feel for how we got to this stage of the Farm Progress Show and Husker Harvest Days each year. The Husker site is very different than both Boone and Decatur. Not exactly custom made the way those two were.
Right. We recently did a renovation on that facility, and it was that. And when we built Boone and Decatur, we built them from scratch. We could make the road widths whatever we wanted them to be. Well, when we did the renovation of Husker Harvest Days, there were a lot of buildings out there and a lot of infrastructure already in place. So we had to stick with the 25-foot wide streets, and it was like remodeling your house, getting the Husker Harvest Days site rebuilt. But the upside of doing that one last is that we'd made all the mistakes in Decatur and Boone that we could make, and we were pretty good at building permanent sites by the time we got to Grand Island, and that site is now, it's quite honestly, it's better than anything else in the world in terms of an outdoor agricultural trade show venue. It's just fantastic.
As I recall, there was quite an investment made in the facility to upgrade it.
Really great partnerships from the city of Grand Island, Hall County, state of Nebraska. Everybody really stepped, and our parent company, stepped forward. It was a really significant build, and just like the builds that we did in Boone and Decatur, got it all done in 1 year, it was a really great partnership, and everybody has something there they can be really proud of. If you haven't seen that show, I expect next year's live events to be better than ever. We've all been so cooped up. I expect that if you haven't been to Husker Harvest Days, put that on the bucket list, because it's an amazing show.
There are a couple of interesting things about it being at Grand Island. First of all, it's out of town a ways, and it strikes me that it's always interesting to see how involved the city of Grand Island becomes, and how much, for example, the mayor was out there, as I recall, for the grand opening after the refurbishing of the facilities, and you could sense the tremendous pride, but it's a few miles out of town.
Yeah, it's about 8 miles outside of town, and where it is, it speaks to a lot of the history of the event. And so the show started, the first show was in 1978, but in 1976, a bunch of community leaders there from Hall County and Grand Island went to the Farm Progress show, and actually, if you remember Frank Holdmeyer, who's kind of a Farm Progress alumni, before he was the editor of Wallace's Farmer, he was a site manager for the Farm Progress Show. So that, and in 1976, he was managing the Farm Progress Show. I believe it was in Fort Dodge, if I remember correctly. And those leaders from the Grand Island community went out and visited Frank and saw how they built the Farm Progress Show and the lot sizes, and really kind of emulated some of that in what they built there outside of Grand Island. The reason it is where it is, and what they were looking for, is a use for the old Cornhusker ammunition plant. The show site sits on a square mile in what was the southwest corner of the munitions plant. They had the munitions plant and then a mile buffer all the way around it. Well, that mile buffer, one of those square miles is where Husker Harvest Days was landed. They began building it, I believe they began building it late in 1977, and finished it through the summer of 78 and had the first show there in 1978. But there's a lot of people that came together. There's a nonprofit organization, the Ag Institute of Nebraska, that was kind of the instigator of the event itself, with a lot of kind of big guns from the Grand Island community. Mr. Ihusen that owned Chief Industries, and a lot of those folks there from Grand Island that came together to make a Western Corn Belt version of the Farm Progress Show, and really started out with the land from the government and built it from there.
It's really a site for the region, and that shows up in the exhibits. For example, there's more emphasis on livestock and livestock facilities, and the short line companies that serve the folks who on livestock farms and ranches.
That's exactly right. There's about 25% of that show site that's dedicated to livestock handling or breeds, or something to do with either the cow-calf side of the livestock industry, or a feedlot. You don't have to go very far. If you drive northwest of that show site in Grand Island, the landscape changes drastically.
Right.
It very clearly it shifts from being irrigated row crop to very much cow-calf country. And those, for folks, I live in Illinois, and I tell people that do stuff with beef, you should really put Husker on the bucket list, because if you're into beef at all, Husker is an amazing show.
The cattle handling demonstration that folks are seeing today there at from the Farm Progress Virtual Experience, how did that start? And there's very much a personality to it, as we've observed in the past.
There is a personality to it. We're fortunate to have Doc Joe they're doing the MC work. And
a veterinarian by training?
Yes,
okay.
Veterinarian, not too far from the show site there. And there's a couple of people that created the cattle handling demonstration. Doc Joe is on that list. There's a couple that I never had the opportunity to meet, but we just this last year lost John Carney. I believe Doc Joe mentioned that. He was from Balin, big country, big valley, and the personality that you mentioned, to have 8 head shoots lined up and those competitors selling head to head against each other, but the fraternity that they have amongst each other, they play pranks on each other, and it is always a lot of fun to witness that cattle handling demonstration. And I think it's probably one of the biggest in the country, if not the biggest in the country, and maybe the first one as well. So a lot of history there with that event, and it has its own history inside the Husker Harvest Days event.
Before we go any further, you used the term fraternity, and I have too in the past, describing, some of these show folks are almost like carnies. I hate to say that, but there is a kind of an itinerant nature to it. I mean, they go from one show to another, but they know each other so well. They work for competitors in many instances. Yep. I think some have been stolen away from competitors at times in the past. Some of the crew have, but there is an interesting camaraderie that I've observed, and you're closer to it than I.
Well, and it is. You think back to even like a Ray Bowerman from Case IH, and you have within this little fraternity there are certain legends, and you get a Ray Bowerman or a John Carney or somebody that, if you have anything to do with a farm show, you've heard of these people, and it's more than just the person from John Deere or the person from Case IH or Pioneer or whatever. It's the whole team. It's the whole team that puts the thing together. So you go outside of the exhibitor base, and it's the tent companies and the landscapers and the electricians and the pressure washers, and everybody has their own personalities, but it is like a family reunion. Then they all get together at the Farm Progress Show, and then a whole lot of them head off for Husker Harvest Days, and then you'll run into a lot of them in Louisville at the National Farm Machinery Show or Commodity Classic, and they are your coworkers, and with a lot of these people, you've been through some wars and some battles and some thunderstorms and some presidential visits, and the things that really mark a point in history.
But one thing I've seen is how helpful they are to each other.
Yes.
And I've seen them band together to move something, or to use one of their trucks to move a competitor's machine or something, just to help them out when they're, especially under the tense times of adverse weather or.
I think back to I think it was about 2007 or 2008 at Husker Harvest Days, and it was either Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning. We had a freak storm come through with some really high winds, and some exhibitors took it better than others. I remember that there was a little tent on the south side of the New Holland lot there at Husker Harvest Days, and this tent went through and just tore the heck out of everything on the New Holland lot. And you had, that morning at 6:30 in the morning, you had John Deere guys, and you had Pioneer people, and you had everybody on the New Holland lot helping them get their stuff put together, and some of it had to go, some of it was not safe to be on the show when we opened it, and the camaraderie that everybody, back when we would have muddy parking lots and that kind of thing, everybody would just pitch in and pull the tractors off their exhibit lots and get them out there with chains on them and help people out, and everybody sort of pulls together, and we're going to get it as good as we can for 8 o'clock in the morning because the growers are coming, and we're going to put on the best show we can for them.
Irrigation equipment, has it been a hallmark of Husker Harvest Days from that first show?
Yeah, the Husker Harvest Days from day one has been about beef and about row crop irrigated crops. It it is the biggest exhibit that a company like Valley or Lindsay or TL or Ranke, the big four, are all based there in Nebraska, and they have their biggest exhibits they do anywhere right there at Husker Harvest Days. So from that standpoint, it's a bit of a global show. There is nowhere better to go to see the latest in irrigation technology for broadacre farming than at Husker Harvest Days.
Because of that, you'll see quite an influx of people attending that show from the Pacific Northwest and from California. Am I correct?
Yeah, and overseas, Israel and other places where they do a lot of this irrigation work. And with the new facility that we have there, I really expect to be a growth area for the show is the international travel, because we get a lot of international travel at Farm Progress Show. But if somebody's in the market for irrigation or beef, they really ought to be going to Husker Harvest Days. It's really a tremendous event for that.
I wonder how long ago it was that the international travelers really started coming to the Farm Progress Show. They've always been easy to spot in the crowd. They wear their caps a little differently. And
they're all dressed like a soccer team running the streets together.
They're dressed a little bit differently. The attire is a little different.
So we really noticed that when we went to the permanent sites, and I think it has to do with the fact that if you're going to organize 60 people to come from Brazil to the Farm Progress Show, it takes some time to get that put together. Well, we were only announcing show dates locations a year ahead of time. And so now they know if they want to organize a trip to the 2024 Farm Progress Show, it is going to be in Boone, Iowa, and they can get their hotels put together, organize their flights, get things built. So I believe it was giving it the footing that led to that international thing. And I think with the emphasis that we put into the Husker Harvest Days site with the new facility and really upgrading and improving that, we're going to go to work on getting folks to come and experience that.
Some companies that are international in nature also take advantage of that, do they not, when those international groups are coming in to maybe set up tours of their seed handling facilities or whatever it might be in the region, maybe the equipment. I think of Grand Island with the fact that, of course, the combine plant is just right down the street.
That is exactly right. That's their busiest week of the year of giving tours, is when Husker Harvest Days is going on, or whether it's Kloss in Omaha or any of those places. And if you're coming, if you're coming from overseas, you're going to go to the Board of Trade. You might stop by the Waterloo to the John Deere factory or the Quad Cities and hit these things and make a tour of the Midwest while you're doing the show.
One thing that occurs to me is how Grand Island's stature has been elevated, for one thing, but the fact it is now the destination, the home of the Nebraska State Fair.
Yeah, that's been a really great partnership to have that come to
And there were doubting Thomases when that moved there.
There most certainly were. They thought that those two things couldn't coexist, or that they would cannibalize each other, when in fact it's a different market. You do have you would have overlap, but having Husker Harvest Days in the middle of the week as a trade event that people are going to do the business of work is totally different than what is recreation for the most part, with a state fair. And it's been good for both, because it's justified some new hotels being built, there's more restaurants, it's a nice cohesive working relationship that we have there, and it has made Grand Island a destination, whether it's a junior nationals for a beef breed or horse shows or anything like that. There's just more things happening in Grand Island than there ever were before.
The temperature can be a little bit cooler for the Husker Harvest Day show, as it's a little bit later in the calendar. Not much later, but I'm often impressed at how much of a difference just a few days can make. And of course, the geography is a little different.
That's exactly right. I never pack a coat to come to the Farm Progress Show at the end of August, but you better have a coat when you're in Grand Island, Nebraska in the middle of September. And it's funny, that's a very pivotal time. Right now, September 17th, it's a real pivotal time when the crops are turning. You can really notice the beans are turning fast right now. When I finish Farm Progress Show and I go home for a day or two over that Labor Day weekend, and I take off for Husker Harvest Days, the beans are all green. And then I come home from Husker Harvest Days about the 17th, 15th of September. The beans have all changed, and it is turning to be fall.
There isn't, I suppose, quite as much emphasis on having air conditioning in the facilities at Grand Island as there is at Decatur and Boone. That number of air-conditioned facilities, because The show is now an August show to some extent in many years. That's really grown dramatically, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
that's, we go out and do an audit of that at the Farm Progress Show every year. How many air-conditioned structures are there? And that number just continues to go up and up and up and up as the years go by. It all started back with the 2007 show, which was really hot in Decatur. And that was another one of those pivotal moments where things changed and all the big major exhibitors started to air condition their tents, and thank goodness they do, because it's a nice relief from walking the streets in Decatur, Illinois in the heat.
That's one thing I think that maybe a lot of people don't realize is everything that goes into these exhibits, whether it's a focus on the power that is necessary to power them or just getting cool air. Those guys who bring that air conditioning into the exhibits will say, all right, tell me what temperature you want in that corner, and they'll deliver it. It's the precision with which these exhibits are set up is remarkable.
And it's, the mechanics behind it, if we're doing our job correctly, people don't notice it. Those big air conditioners generate a lot of condensed water, and that water's got to go somewhere. It can't make a muddy mess. We got to have a plan for that. And they take big three-phase power. Well, those big three-phase power generators require a whole lot of diesel, so we've got to get diesel fed into that throughout that show site at night. And the trash pickup and a lot of those kind of things that we've all taken training at Disney, so that we can try to make that as seamless.
Wait a minute, is that right?
Yeah, we have had
trained by Disney.
We've been through. I think I've been through the Disney Institute 3 different times.
Please don't refer to me as Goofy anytime.
Well,
okay?
this is a real Mickey Mouse organization. So, but yeah. My predecessor, Mark Randall, took us down there, and we went through 2 different courses there, and then the Farm Show Council, which is an organization of all of us farm show managers. We recently were in Orlando and went through the Disney Institute, and you learn these crazy things that only event organizers need to know, which is Disney knows exactly how many steps you will take with a piece of trash in your hand before you just say heck with it and throw it on the ground. So you can determine how the density of the trash cans as people are walking the streets, and just a bunch of those kind of behind the scenes things that they think really hard about, and they have all these formulas and have it well thought out, and it helps folks like us put on events like these.
Well, there's so much cooperation that is necessary from government, and whether it's the county commissioners in the county in which you operate, or
state police, state patrol, traffic, EMS. We want everybody, when you're throwing a party, you want everybody to be safe. And so there are a lot of partnerships from all the communities that host us, whether it's Hall County, Nebraska, or any of the other places that we have events. And those are the people that really, they deserve a big thank you, because nobody's out there thanking them for keeping the traffic safely moving through. As a matter of fact, they don't get treated all that well occasionally by some of our attendees, because they're trying to do their job.
Well, I know it gets noticed in the state capitals of the states when the Farm Progress Show is going on. Let's drop into the office right now of the governor of Nebraska, Governor Pete Ricketts. Well, it's a pleasure to have joining us here on our noon show broadcast during the Farm Progress virtual experience, the governor of Nebraska, Governor Pete Ricketts. We're sorry we couldn't come your way directly this year, sir. I know you were looking forward to it. A lot of folks in your state were looking forward to it, and many travelers from outside of Nebraska as well were excited about coming there.
Yeah, I'm sorry that we're not having Husker Harvest Days as well. It's one of my favorite events throughout the year. I know it's a big deal for folks in agriculture. It's a chance to see all the great new things that are coming down the road for agriculture, and as well as a chance just to get together with folks in the industry and share stories and fellowship. So it's disappointing we're not doing it this year, but we'll look forward to it in 2021.
Grand Island has really come into its own, it seems. But the state fair locating there a few years ago, Husker Harvest Days, the site being upgraded just a little bit west of town, Grand Island is really growing, it seems, and thriving.
Yeah, Grand Island is really a great community, and you hit upon some of the great things. We just wrapped up our state fair, and we had a tremendous event. In fact, I'm talking to some of the organizers there. They were saying they've learned some things that they want to carry forward into 2021. But all the young people got a chance to show off all their hard work they've been working on throughout the year. We were able to hold some of the events. Obviously, it didn't look like it did last year, but by and large, people were really grateful for the opportunity to be there, to be able to show off what we're doing in agriculture here in the state. And again, celebrate the state fair, which actually predates our statehood. So we had a great state fair last couple weeks.
I noticed a comment that you made a few days ago about labor participation of the state, that it is, I believe you said, the highest labor participation rate of any state in America. And it occurred to me that many of those jobs are very closely tied to farms and ranches, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So Nebraska is #1 for labor force participation rate and also for employment per population ratio. And, that's no surprise. Anybody who knows Nebraskans knows that we got a great work ethic here. And certainly that's one of the things that contributes to our great state. And we continue to see that even through this pandemic, we've got the lowest unemployment rate in the country right now. And so we want to, that's part of what makes this an attractive place to be able to grow. And we're going to continue to, focus on those sort of things, even as we work our way through this pandemic.
The agriculture industry in your state has had its share of challenges with floods of 2019, pandemic-related challenges, of course, this year as well. There are always some crop problems, it seems like. How are your farmers and ranchers doing, Governor?
Yeah, obviously, it's been a tough 18 months in agriculture for the reason you just described. And of course, that impacts our entire state as well. We're talking about agriculture here in our state. 1 in 4 jobs in Nebraska are tied back to agriculture. So one of the things we've done with pandemic money that the federal government has distributed is we created a program, for example, for not only small businesses, but for livestock producers as well, so that they can get grants directly from the state. And of course, USDA has been very helpful with the program, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, which has distributed about $679 million to farmers and ranchers. And of course, one of the best thing, though, of course, is that Nebraskans are just community minded. They work together. So when we have a disaster like we did with the flooding, people pitch in. When we have this other challenges going on, people just pull together to overcome those challenges. And that's really the great strength of our state. It gets back to that work ethic that just Nebraskans care about each other. They're willing to work hard. And that's what's helping agriculture really overcome this. Certainly the folks in agriculture prefer to be able to grow their crops or raise their livestock and sell them at a fair price in the marketplace. But between the government assistance and what's going on with the local communities, I think that we're trying to get through this pandemic and look forward to better days ahead.
You talked about that community spirit pulling together. There are those communities that really stand out in your mind. Towns that I visited over the years, West Point, Nebraska is one of those. And I bet you could name some others, but I've been there a few times and I'm always impressed at what those people are doing.
Yeah, West Point it's a great community. It's in Cumming County. And actually, one of the other things I love pointing out about Cumming County is that it's one of the highest ag gross receipts counties in the country. And that gets back to animal agriculture, livestock. And that's one of the important value-added agricultural things we can do is, as people say, have that grain or that soybean, walk off the farm. And that's, really one of the things we try to promote is animal agriculture, because that is a great value-added agricultural aspect for us. And we got a great history and tradition here. Obviously, we're very strong in cattle. We're #2 for all cattle on feed. We're very strong in hogs and pigs. And then one of the markets we're developing right now is poultry. Lincoln Premium Poultry and Costco have recently opened up a facility in Fremont, Nebraska, and that's giving the opportunity for about 100 farmers to be able to raise poultry for this facility. And that facility is going to use the equivalent of 2,000 acres of corn and 2,000 acres of beans every week. So it's a great opportunity for families to be able to diversify their income, to be able to keep young people on the farm. And of course, it's a great opportunity for us to keep more of what we grow here in the state and add value to it.
I suspect I would hear from some of my corn grower friends if I didn't point out that corn is very much king in Nebraska as well. Are you worried, though, a little bit about the future of ethanol, Governor, given the fact that it is so important to corn growers in terms of the demand?
Yeah, so corn is #3 here in Nebraska. We're the 3rd largest corn producer. And definitely ethanol has really, really been challenged the last couple of years as well. Between the waivers the EPA has been giving out to oil refineries, and then of course just with this pandemic, the reduced demand for gasoline consumption as people have been staying home. It's really been a tough time for ethanol. We have seen a couple of bright spots when the administration allowed us to use E15 all year round. That is great because E15 is great for your car. It what I tell everybody in the ethanol industry is, look, there's three things you got to remember. You're going to save money at the pump, you're going to help clean up the air, and you're going to help our farmers and ranchers. We should be repeating those three things every time we talk about ethanol. And one of the other things that the state is doing is we just finished up an E30 pilot with our state vehicles, working with the University of Nebraska to study mileage and maintenance so that we can get some information out there. So because you can actually use those higher blends of ethanol in cars that were produced after 2001. And we're going to have some great documentation here, probably about the end of September when that all that data gets pulled together to be able to talk about. So I'm excited to be able to discuss that toward the end of the month here. And again, just adding to the body of knowledge about all the benefits of ethanol.
Aside from the crops we've discussed, what else really matters to farmers and ranchers in Nebraska?
Well, again, part of what we want to do is make sure that we're opening up those opportunities for international trade. And I'll tell you, this really, really works. So last September, we went to Vietnam on a trade mission and met with a number of officials, including the Prime Minister there. And before the pandemic really shut down international travel here, a Vietnamese delegation came to Nebraska and signed a memorandum of understanding to buy about $3 billion worth of Nebraska agricultural products over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. That's a big deal, and they've been keeping that promise. Our beef exports to Vietnam this year, despite the pandemic, are up 54%, and our pork exports to Vietnam are up 86%. So that's a great example of how international trade works. You got to go on those trade missions, develop those relationships. But when you do, it's a big deal. And that's really helped us because what we saw, we were running well ahead on both beef and pork exports coming into April. With the pandemic, things slowed down, and so did our exports. But again, countries like Vietnam are continuing to buy, and we want to continue to see that. And of course, we're also expecting China, with the new trade deal the administration negotiated with them, to buy a lot more of our agricultural products as well. And they are on track to be able to exceed the baseline year 2017 with regard to their agricultural purchases. So if we continue to see that strong trend, we'll see a very good year of ag exports to China.
In trade with the Asian nations, it seems relationships really, really matter a lot, as we've seen over the years. We only have just about a minute left here. What would you say to a young person, Governor, who says, I've been thinking about this ag industry as a career, but this is kind of a long, challenging period here of a tough ag economy. What would you say to them?
Well, it's certainly been a tough ag economy, but I would say there are tremendous opportunities for young people who want to go into agriculture. USDA has done a study that shows that literally we're going to be training about 37,000 or 33,000 people, somewhere in there, with degrees to take over not only production agriculture, but also things like environmental science and natural resource management and so forth. And that we're going to have a demand for about 54,000 jobs. So significantly more demand than we're turning out young people in those fields. And also there are a lot of different careers that go into agriculture. I mentioned 1 in 4 jobs here in Nebraska are tied back to it, but you can think about whether it's crop analysts or soil scientists or grain elevator operator or diesel mechanic. I mean, there's just a wide variety of careers that are tied back to agriculture here in our state. So if you're a young person who's thinking about agriculture, there are a lot of careers and a lot of opportunity, and there's going to be high demand in those fields. So I would really recommend that if you've got an interest, take a strong look at it because there's going to be great careers available.
The bright, enthusiastic young people with that work ethic will always find a place, won't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why we love hiring Nebraskans here in our state.
Governor, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for spending time with us here on the Farm Progress Virtual Experience.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. And again, we're looking forward to 2021 and Husker Harvest Days in Grand Island.
Thank you, Governor. We appreciate it. Governor Pete Ricketts joining us here on the Farm Progress Virtual Experience. A lot of this has had to come together rather quickly as we've put these elements of the real shows together. It's been a lot of heavy lifting on your part. I want to congratulate you and your team, Matt, for making things happen. And before I forget it, I want to express thanks one more time to our video crew, 22 Creative Group. They were all over the grounds and all over the equipment so that we could see the equipment like never before.
I would agree with that completely. They've worked really hard to make this happen. There have been a lot of people that have, as you mentioned, worked quickly to make this thing come together, a merger of the Farm Progress Show and Husker Harvest Days. Really need to thank our premier sponsors. We can't do this kind of thing without those sponsors, but some great partners have stepped forward. We have Bayer, Channel, DeKalb Asgrow, Agco, Syngenta, and Raven, and those 6 premiers. You know, we limited it to 6 premier sponsorships, and those companies stepped right up and carried it for us, and we genuinely appreciate them helping us out with this project.
Everything came together so quickly, it seems.
It
A lot of
certainly
cooperation for the companies that brought equipment and exhibits here.
Yeah, and they were really trusting in us that we were going to be able to provide them a platform like this to show their equipment off, because they invested a lot of money to truck this stuff in just to have cameras mounted on it and then send it back home. So, you know, a big thanks to everybody that put in that work.
Well, thank you again for being with us, sir, and shedding some light on a lot of things that go on to make a show like this possible, when we're able to have the live shows, and also for making this virtual experience come to life here via the technology. Aren't we blessed to have the technology that we didn't, you know, as recently as 2 or 3 or 5 years ago?
We couldn't have done this not very long ago. We wouldn't have been able to do this. But I also wanted to thank you, because you have put a lot of time and, you know, a lot of your personal effort into making this thing as good as it is. And so I deeply appreciate that.
It's fun to hang out together, and we'll look forward to kicking the dust next year here together.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us, folks, here on the Farm Progress Virtual Experience Noon Show. There's more coming away and coming your way in some of the informational seminars. Stay with us for those. You have some things you can learn there for sure.